episode 30 of Bando's Breakdowns. My name is Zain Bando. Thank you again for joining me on this Wednesday afternoon. I greatly appreciate it. And I greatly appreciate all your guys' support as this show is still in its relative infancy. And thank you for taking some time out of your busy week to be able to tune in to listen to me or to watch me cover what I think is the most important in the world of sports from my perspective. So today, we have a bit of a packed show, but before we get into it, just wanted to remind you all to please be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, youtube.com/ETB Network is where you can go to find all of the content, whether it's this show, the MMA Outsiders, Forever Power 5 football forecast, and so much more. Um, again, that's where all of our content lives. You can also listen to this podcast wherever your podcast, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and so much more. So again, if you're on the road, if you're in your car, if you're at work, if you're on a break, whatever the case is, and you want to just listen to me, you can do so. And just breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts and so much more. So again, we greatly appreciate support on both sides of the spectrum there. As well as we're slowly but surely trying to build this thing up, both on the subscriber count and just on the audio side as well, getting more people to put it in their feeds so they can listen to it on a weekly basis. Also wanted to remind you, too, that this show is presented by Playback. They've been a wonderful sponsor to us so far, dating back to the last NBA end of regular season and postseason. We've already had a couple of NBA streams to start the regular season, so stay tuned for more of those. Just did a major one on Veterans Day where a bunch of the guys within the network, I was not on this particular stream, but a bunch of guys within the network went through 5 games or so. And it was fun. They did like an NBA whip around style show, very similar to the NFL Red Zone. So that's going to become more of a thing. If there are enough games to do it, they will certainly do it's that. So again, it would be very, very much appreciated if you guys go check out our Playback community, playback.tv/ETB Network. And speaking of Playback as well, watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience, from playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule, which I'm sure within the next several weeks and getting into the month of December will get even busier, so to speak, as well. So, getting into the show, we're going to get into Zain's overview. We have some pretty big breaking news off the top here to start the show, and that is that my Chicago Bears are in turmoil. No, it's a literal thing. As of the time that we're recording this, within the last several hours on Tuesday morning, NFL insider Adam Schefter reported that yes, Shane Waldron, the Bears offensive coordinator, is out of Chicago. This is a huge deal. The Bears have yet to score an offensive touchdown in the last 2 games, and the Bears have just been in complete shamble mode. And the Bears are at least putting in complete shamble mode. Just given where they're currently at right now, obviously below 500. Just suffered a loss to the Patriots this past Sunday. Got absolutely destroyed. 19-3 was the final score there, and just a brutal game overall. I'll be the first to admit that I've been really wrong on this Bears team, really since about the middle of September. I said that I said that I said early in the season that the Bears, really just kind of shot themselves in the foot. There were too many expectations, and just overall, like, just something has seemed off with this team from the very beginning of the season. Well, not the beginning of the season, but more so after the Colts game. They won a couple in a row mid-season. Just overall, I think the disappointing part of this whole thing is just the expectations. You come in as the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft in Caleb Williams. You get all this new talent around the team. You have Matt Eberflus, who seems like he has things under control. And when he doesn't, and he says, we're in the evaluation phase, we're in the process phase, it's the same repeating cycle over and over and over again if you're Chicago. And I think that's the most disappointing part of this whole thing. Let's get to the other crux of the situation here. Thomas Brown, the ex-offensive passing game coordinator, will now be moved to offensive coordinator. So, I think this is interesting. The Bears are just using what they can from within. And I mean, overall, overall, I would just say this at the same time. I would say too that I think the big thing with this Bears team is now they can't really afford to worry about the wins and the losses. They have to worry about development at this point. This Bears team is slowly but surely going nowhere. As the season progresses, there's no way they'll make the playoffs. They have like an under 10% chance of doing that. So I think that's out the window now. If anyone wants to get their hopes up in regards to what this Bears team could end up becoming, I think you're going to have to wait another year to find that out. And I think another issue that, this Bears team has too is just, they're playing in a competitive division. You got Detroit, Minnesota, and Green Bay. Those are the Bears' next three opponents, with the Packers coming up this upcoming Sunday. A team that's still in the thick of um, the NFC North divisional picture, as well as the wild card picture. The division is going to be too far fetched. It seems like Detroit or Minnesota is going to win that division, but Green Bay is still in the mix as well. So, I think the next few weeks are going to be critical, man. The next few weeks are really going to define where this Bears team is. They could free fall to 4-8. They could improve to 7-5, 8-5. Um, I mean, I would say I would say another interesting thing to think about too is the fact that, I think with this wild card picture in itself, you have these teams like Arizona and San Francisco and Seattle. You're gonna have to worry about tiebreakers down the stretch. Obviously, Seattle plays the Bears later in the season, but of course, Arizona just beat the Bears a couple of weeks ago, so there's still going to be more variables to work out. The big question is going to be: is can the Bears sustain essentially a brand new regime mid-season? I don't know if they can do that. So this is just a wrinkle effect. This is going to continue over the next several weeks. This is also going to continue into the off season. I think there's some things that the Bears are really going to have to think about. Just at the top, both managerially and both coaching wise, is Ryan Poles really the guy to do this? Ryan Poles is the guy who's backed Matt Eberflus this entire time. I don't know. That's the major question. Only the Bears front office can answer that. Um, but who knows? I really can't say either which way about it. But what I can say though is the Bears have a second half of the schedule to play, and that's going to be the big thing. The one good thing Eberflus did say in his press conference, well, at the time that we're recording this, it's Tuesday on Veterans Day, which was yesterday. He did say, that they're going into divisional games and stuff like that. Um, it's going to be a matter of what can they do to sustain themselves, and they either have to start to win or they have to look to build toward the future, and this is going to be the week where they're going to have to figure it out. So I don't really know elsewhere what other to say than Shane Waldron was a bad hire. He shouldn't have been hired. It should have been somebody like a Ben Johnson. It should have been another offensive coordinator that really knows the quarterback and can mold the quarterback, and it doesn't seem like Shane Waldron has been able to do that with Caleb Williams, and I think that's the disappointing part. Um, I think another wrinkle to this as well. Um, I think another wrinkle to this as well is the fact that the Bears have had the same ownership for a very very long time, and I think there's a lot of stipulation like, oh, should the Bears think about getting new owners? Should they sell the team? Will they be better once the team is sold? I think those questions are only going to be answered once they find a coach that I think is sustainable, and it's clear that this coaching staff is not that. So, as a Bears fan, am I disappointed that this team is losing? Yes, but in another respect, I understand because they have to build for the future, and Caleb Williams is not going to be like Rome. Rome wasn't built in a day, and you have to remember this is only his first loss at home of his career. People seem to sometimes forget that this kid's only a rookie, and he's making rookie mistakes, and his offensive line isn't holding him up. So not all of this is on him. I think that's the overall point that I wanted to get at too. Is when you're in year one and when you've only played in 9 games, that's not a huge sample size, and I think that's something the Bears need to be wary of as well. Just kind of moving towards the second half of the year, et cetera, et cetera. So just something to keep in mind there. If you're a Bears fan, I understand why we're all upset this week. I really do. But again, this is just the cycle. This is part of being a Bears fan, I guess. And this is part of also following this team, is you just never know what you're going to get. So that's another aspect there that I think is important to think about as well. We're going to get into the Green Bay game, though, in a little bit. We're going to move on, though, to some MMA stuff now. We're going to get into UFC 309. I made my pick on the most recent edition of the MMA Outsiders that came out late last night. But I'm just going to say this. UFC 309, a huge card. Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, Madison Square Garden. All the stakes are attached. The greatest fighter of all time versus the best heavyweight of all time. It's gonna be a good fight, man. I mean, I know that a lot of people, are disappointed. It's not Tom Aspinall. It's obviously not Francis Ngannou, of course. But what it is, though, is it's a fight that I think a lot of people have been waiting to see. It's a fight that Stipe Miocic deserves, given what he's been able to do in the heavyweight division, given who he's been able to beat. There is the narrative, always coming off a loss. Does he really deserve it? I mean, when your most recent loss is to Francis Ngannou, and given how good Francis Ngannou has been over the last several years, I think overall, I mean, something you gotta worry about and keep in mind too is, this is a legacy fight. If Jones wins, he has a lot of options. He could do the Aspinall fight. He could do the Pereira fight. Whereas if Stipe Miocic, beats Jon Jones, he really has nothing left to prove. So I think that's the most interesting part of this fight is you have to look at, where both guys currently sit, in both that heavyweight division, but as well as just overall, from a UFC Legends perspective, they both proved everything that they wanted to, and then some. I like Jones in the fourth round to get this done by TKO here. I think Stipe is good, but I think Stipe is going to have to get him out of there early. And I think what Jones has done over the last 3 years, bulking up his body, getting to heavyweight, working with the right people, using the UFC Performance Institute, believing in himself, going back to what's important to him, which is God and his family. I mean, I think he's doing all the right things. I really do. I don't want to say he's on the straight and narrow, but he's definitely in a situation where I think he has the potential to do something great as long as he can sustain his success, man. I mean, he's done everything he's ever wanted to do in this sport. The only thing he hasn't done is fight in his hometown, and he's getting a chance to do that this Saturday against a guy that a lot of people think, is the guy to beat him. So I think that's going to be the most interesting part of this whole thing is, just being able to see how does this fight play out holistically. Can Stipe catch Jones? Can Jones use his wrestling to control the pace of the fight? I think it's a fight that's a coin flip, but I do think Jones is just a little better. I think the betting odds are disrespectful. I think Jones being as big of a favorite as he is incorrect. But what I can say, though, too, is Stipe's been the underdog before in some of these fights, and he's won. So, no guarantees as to how this fight will go. I just know that I think it has potential to be fantastic. So does Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler. I'm actually picking Michael Chandler in this one. And it's for the sole simple reason that you don't post on Instagram 4 to 5 times a day with motivational quotes and manifestations and see with the top and all that stuff without manifesting it. And I think if Chandler knows he wants to keep his legacy alive, this win against Oliveira would do him wonders, would give him a chance to really ruffle some feathers in the lightweight division, give him some leverage, either a lightweight title shot or a huge fight with Conor if Conor decides to come back. A lot of unanswered questions there. UFC 309, 10 p.m. Eastern start, around 6 p.m. Eastern or so for the prelims. You can get it on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. You don't want to miss it. But The night before is a major boxing match. We got Jake Paul taking on Mike Tyson on Netflix. First time that Netflix has really dove into the sports world. They're doing it with a boxing match. It's a sanctioned fight with 14-ounce gloves. It's going to be a spectacle, but it's a sanctioned fight, and it's a fight that I think a lot of people are excited about. Just considering the backstory. I mean, you got Mike Tyson, who's nearly 60 years old, arguably the best heavyweight of all time, taking on Jake Paul, who's really embraced, I guess you could say, the influencer boxing scene and really, tried to give himself a cushion, against some of these UFC veterans that he's competed against. It's definitely it's an interesting fight, man. It really is. It really is. I just think I just think this fight could go a multitude of ways. I do think Jake Paul wins the fight, but again, if Mike Tyson comes in shape and he lands one punch, who knows, man? I mean, this fight could be over in as quickly as 15 seconds, or it could go the full 8 round distance, and who knows, man? I mean, I really don't know how this fight plays out. Again, if it plays out the way everybody thinks it does, where Tyson's too old and he just goes in there and gets obliterated, I wouldn't be surprised. But there's also the other side of the coin where Mike Tyson comes in shape. You never know. But I like Jake Paul here. Again, pick the fight up on Netflix. It's free with a subscription. The not the whole card, but most of the card is going to be on Netflix. It's a 4-fight main card on Netflix, and then the other 3 fights I think are on the Most Valuable Promotions YouTube channel, according to a recent press release that I just got from NBP leading up to this weekend. So stay tuned for more on that. Stay tuned for the fight. And I think it'll be interesting. Again, Arlington, Texas, AT&T Stadium, home of the Dallas Cowboys, should be a very interesting atmosphere there as well. But I like Jake Paul to get it done. Probably a late TKO or a decision win, but I would say within the first 4 rounds, if he were to finish him, that's when Jake Paul would do it. So I like Jake Paul coming up this weekend. All right, let's move on now to some college football. Albeit this game, Illinois takes on Michigan State in Champaign. Final home game for the Illini on Senior Day. I like Illinois to get it done. I mean, they've lost now. What is it? 2 in a row. Tough sledding. No longer a ranked AP top 25 team. Taking on a Michigan State team that is a first-year coach in Jonathan Smith, sitting at 4-5 on the year, still with an outside track to make a bowl game. Their bowl projections don't look very good, but I do think Illinois is just better everywhere. I think they've got better talent at every position. I think their defense is better, and of course, they have the better coach. I mean, it's obvious. Brett Bielema, a lot more experience than Jonathan Smith, has way more Big Ten experience than Jonathan Smith. And although Brett Bielema is a fan of Jonathan Smith, I don't think that's going to translate on the field. I like Illinois to get it done. I like Illinois to cover the spread. I think that the running back tandem of Valentine and Wofford have a good day. I think Altmaier does a good job throwing the football. I think Pat Bryant catches 2 touchdowns in his final home game. I think it'll be a very exciting game, and I think it'll be a good way to send the seniors off before Illinois' final 2 games against Rutgers and against Northwestern. So just something to keep in mind there. But I really do like Illinois to get it done this weekend in Champaign and really show the country that they're still a legitimate presence in the Big Ten and still have an outside shot of finishing within the top 4 if other results go its way. So give me Illinois to get it done. We're going to go with a final score of 27-17. I think they pull away late and get it done and improve to 7-3. Well, I like Illinois to get it done at home this weekend. All right, now we're going to move on to the other preview. This is back in Chicago. Number 2 Ohio State takes on Northwestern. Northwestern is obviously a huge underdog. I think it's a 38.5-point underdog now. They're playing at Wrigley Field. Simply put, man, this is a tune-up game for Ohio State. They got a huge game against Indiana a week from Saturday. This should be no problem at all. Ohio State just has athletes everywhere. They've got future NFL draft picks everywhere. And no disrespect to Northwestern. They've done some good things. They've won some nice games. But, I mean, I think it just goes to show you, and this is no disrespect to the Cats, but when you need overtime to beat Purdue, who got shut out 45-0 against Ohio State and also shut out against Purdue and got humiliated by Notre Dame, I think it goes to show you how very average Northwestern is compared to all of those other instances that I just mentioned. I think Ohio State runs the ball really well in this game. I think they win like 34-3. I think it'll be over by like halftime probably. And Northwestern will have to win its final two games to make a bowl, which is not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, this Michigan team that they have coming up isn't very good. Illinois, I think it'll be really contingent on how Illinois does this week, but I just think this is a wash for Northwestern. I think Ohio State wins easily, stays in the Big Ten title hunt, stays in the college football playoff discussion, and moves on from there. But I just think Ohio State is a much better team at this point in the year, and I think they're going to show it against the Cats on Saturday, despite being on the road. The other Big Ten team that's still in the hunt for this thing is Indiana. They're 10-0 for the first time in program history, just knocked off Michigan in Bloomington. Just want to give a quick shout out to Kurt Cinetti here. I mean, he's done wonders for this program. I mean, in 1 year, he's done things that this team hasn't done in 50 plus years. So good for him. I understand their schedule, or its schedule rather, is not the greatest schedule in the world, but they're winning the games they're supposed to, and that's the most important part of it. Um, um, I would say, I would say, I would say, just to kind of piggyback, they're doing things that they haven't done in 50 plus years simply because they're ignoring all the outside noise. They don't care. Um, they don't care that they even played anybody ranked in the AP top 25. They don't care that they're disrespected by the national media and that the national media doesn't give them all the credit in the world. They don't care that, they're not getting the same publicity that an Alabama or a Clemson would get. They're just going out and winning football games, and they're making the committee work for what they for what they believe. And I just think truly, that this team, I think, has a lot of potential to do some good things. But I feel like, going on a bye this week is critical. But I don't know, man. I think this Ohio State game will show a lot. Will they still make the playoff? Of course, but I think, they might lose their chance to go to the Big Ten championship, and that's something that, I think a lot of people, in the state of Indiana would love to see. That game is in Indianapolis. It would draw insane crowds. If Indiana were to make it, I'm sure a lot of Indiana fans already have their tickets. They probably were worried that they wouldn't make it at one point, but now it looks like they're one win away from doing just that, potentially two, but really, really only one win away from doing so. But going up against Ohio State, it's easier said than done. So, I mean, I think Indiana should be proud of where they are, but this is no disrespect. They have not played any legitimate competition yet. So I think that's something to bear in mind too. Yes, they're 10-0, but look at who they've actually played. Yes, they're blowing teams out. But again, I think the level of competition is critical. And there also is the argument too that I've seen out there that if they had a different logo, if they were a Penn State or a Bama or whatever, they'd have the same situation. I would say no. I mean, your schedule should be judged on who you play when you played them, and it's clear that they haven't played anybody remotely close, to really competing against them, and I think that's a major concern. So again, they're 10-0. You should be happy for them, but still, there's that caveat in there that they may not be as good as they say they are, especially with how their next couple of games go before the postseason begins. So, Indiana fans, you can relish in it, but I have to spit facts where they're true. And simply put, I just don't think Indiana's fully been. Um, I just think Indiana has been a little bit overhyped, to say the least. Even though, yes, 10-0 is very impressive, they're one of the few undefeated teams left. I think it still matters who you play when you play them. All right, moving over to some college basketball just briefly. Illinois looks really good right now with their new look freshman team. They've got like 5 freshmen on their team. They got a bunch of European guys that look really good. And Will Riley is an absolute stud. He was the Big Ten freshman of the week this past week, which was very, very cool. Good for him there. Let's see. We had a pretty big upset over the weekend. We had Auburn knocking off Houston at Houston. That was a huge win for Bruce Pearl over Samson on the road, especially with all the stuff that happened on the plane the night before. Um, I would say I would say another interesting thing would be, you know, just taking a look, overall, like at the slate of college basketball. I think it's too early to say who's good and who's not. But what I can tell you is there's a lot of parity. I mean, when Bruce Pearl goes on the field of 68 and says a game versus Houston in the middle of November feels like a game in March, I think it goes to show you how excited he is for the college basketball season. And I think it's good. You want to have that parity early. You want to have these upsets, potential upsets early on, and I think that's the most exciting part about it. We're going to do these little segments probably every single week of what I think of the observations of college basketball. This one is really short because I can't fully say a ton because some of the major games are going to already have been played by the time this show comes out. Um, um, we're by the time you come back and listen to this, Rev, there's a lot of what I would have said doesn't really apply. But as the season, gets more in the swing of things and we get more into the conference action, we'll get more into the nuts and bolts. But now we're going to move into Zan Zinger. And the first Zan Zinger I wanted to do was just shout out Chicago Sports Radio, shout out David Kaplan, shout out Jonathan Hood. I mean, just everybody on Chicago Sports Radio just destroying the Bears. This is what we need. I mean, this is really what we need. Just from a fan base perspective, we need people calling the Bears out on their hypocrisy. We need people calling the Bears out on their bull crap. And we need people calling the Bears out who know and who have authority and can be held accountable for certain aspects like this. And I just think overall, I just think overall, I want to see more. I want to see more from this Bears team. The Chicago Sports Radio guys want to as well. And I think Eberflus needs to be fired. I really do. I hope it happens at the end of the year. To me, it's clear he's not the right guy. He can't even conduct an interview over the phone properly. I mean, in David Kaplan's comment about, his phone signal being as bad as the offensive line is as hilarious as you could possibly get. So I think that's another thing that you got to focus on there too. But this is just a dumpster fire, a total mess. And I would like to see just the Bears continuing to be held a little bit more accountable, just, just moving forward. And, I guess I'm just going to say it right here, right now. I think the Packers beat the Bears, and not only do I think the Packers beat the Bears, I think it's a shellacking. I think it's 35-10. I think it's a potential lock of the week pick. I'm not going to say it right here, right now, just yet, but I do think that could be one of the potentials for survivor of the week for those of you who watch Bando's Blitz. So that's kind of all I have to say about that. And then, of course, because I have to shout this guy out, the Utah athletic director, man, goes up after the game against BYU on Saturday in a press conference setting for the greatest minute and 45 seconds you've ever seen. He literally goes in and just goes, our team and our kids were cheated tonight. This is absolutely embarrassing. I'm going to talk to the Big 12. And this was because of a real ticky-tack penalty that was called late in the game that swung in BYU's way. They eventually won on a game-winning field goal. And shout out to the Utah athletic director for defending his guys. You see that very little in the world of college football, in the world of sports, period. An authority figure that isn't the coach coming out to defend his team. You got to give the Utah AD props. Yes, he was fined for this, but to hell with the fine. I mean, it was a blatant call that the officials missed. And I'm pleased. I'm not encouraging coaches or ADs to get fined, but holy cow, when the call is that bad, you gotta give credit where credit is due, and that is literally exactly what he did there as well. We're rolling into the end of the show now. We're gonna get into Zan's look ahead, and we're gonna start with the NFL slate as we usually do. Let's go over who's playing this week. It's a packed week in the NFL. Had a pretty decent week in the NFL predictions wise as well. Thursday night game, Commanders and the Eagles. And then the Sunday slate begins. Browns and the Saints, Vikings and the Titans, Jaguars and the Lions, Ravens and the Steelers. Huge game in the AFC North. Atlanta versus Denver, Cincinnati versus the Chargers. Then, of course, moving right up along here, Raiders and the Dolphins, Colts and the Jets, Packers, Bears, Rams, Patriots, Seattle, San Francisco, KC and the Bills, potential game of the year, and of course, Houston and Dallas. And of course, let's get into the college football top 25 slate, which is going to be very, very fun. I'm excited about this week. We're getting into the end of the college football season here very, very shortly. Again, Ohio State versus Northwestern, Cincinnati versus number 17 Iowa State, Texas versus Arkansas, Clemson versus Pittsburgh, Utah at Colorado, Mercer versus Alabama, number 6 Penn State versus Purdue, Virginia versus number 10 Notre Dame, Boston College versus Southern Methodist, LSU versus Florida, Louisville versus Stanford, Missouri versus South Carolina, Boise State versus San Jose State, Arizona State traveling to Manhattan to take on number 19 Kansas State, Oregon versus Wisconsin, Tennessee versus Georgia, which feels like it's become an even bigger game, New Mexico State versus Texas A&M, Washington State versus New Mexico, and of course, Kansas traveling to number 9 BYU, who is currently sitting at an undefeated record as well, and only a couple wins away from winning the Big 12. So that's good. Gonna do it though for Bando's breakdowns. We didn't have any errors this week, so thank you again for tuning in. Again, this was episode 30. I greatly appreciate all of you guys taking around 30 minutes or so to listen to me ramble on my thoughts on the world of sports. It's greatly appreciated. Just a few quick reminders before we get out of here. Be sure to listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcast. Again, that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, YouTube Premium, and so much more. And then again, because it really helps out the algorithm, be sure to turn on post notifications, youtube.com/ETV network as well. And for myself, Zain, Bando, and for everybody else at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, thank you again for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I hope you enjoy all of the major sports that are taking place, whether it's the UFC, boxing, college football, or the NFL. And I will see you guys next week for episode 31. Have a good one.